It's my pleasure to welcome Aleksandra Luksyte, an associate professor at the University of Western Australia Business School, and Joseph Carpini, senior lecturer at the University of Western Australia Business School, whose paper was recently published in Human Resources Management. The paper title is Conscientiousness and Perceived Ethicality, examining why hierarchy of authority diminishes this positive relationship. Aleksandra's and Joseph's co-authors were Sharon Parker and Mark Griffin. Alex and Joseph, welcome to the interview with HRM with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
I have several questions for you, and one of them is, why is this study important? What is the problem that led you to research this?
So thank you for the question. The problem was that we wanted to study conscientiousness because we know from research that human resource managers, practitioners, organizations, we as academic advisors, we like conscientious people because we know that they are diligent, planful, organized, work hard, achieve, persevere. We also know that highly conscientious people uphold high ethical standards. And we know that organizations want to hire conscientious people for these reasons. We also know that organizations try to implement certain policies and procedures via work design practices, such as implementing standard formal procedures that everyone follows so that there are no deviations, that everyone is aware of the norms and procedures. And then we thought, okay, what happens if you put highly conscientious people who love the norms, the rules, the procedures, who follow them very well? So will they thrive in such highly formalized and standard organizations? And we actually found that it's not the case, and particularly that others do not notice all these excellent traits of highly conscientious people in highly formalized and standardized work contexts.
To test our hypotheses, we collected multi-source data from 820 employees, their supervisors, and their peers from a variety of different professions. What we ended up finding was that the hierarchy of authority, as we expected, moderated the positive relationship between conscientiousness and voice, which in turn explained other people's perceptions of the focal employee's level of ethicality. So specifically, what we ended up finding was that conscientiousness was positively related to peer assessments of ethicality via promotive voice, but not prohibitive voice, when hierarchy of authority was lower, but not higher. Voice, just to clarify, is around that self-initiated, visible change behaviors that people make. And promotive voice is akin to doing good because what you're doing is suggesting new ways of doing things that enhances the organization's or the unit's performance. Whereas prohibitive voice actually entails kind of not doing bad because you're essentially pointing out areas where deficiencies or challenges might be. So what we ended up finding was that the effect is through promotive voice, which is essentially this doing good, and not prohibitive voice, the doing bad side of things or preventing the doing of bad. Also noteworthy is that we replicated our results while controlling for age and gender, both of which have been meta-analytically found to be related to perceptions of ethicality, and our results remain the same.
We think that we have interesting theoretical perceptions to the trait activation theory. So if you know, trait activation theory has been studied extensively to examine why and how people with certain personalities behave differently in various contexts. So our paper is not about trait activation, it's about trait perception. Because what we found is that peers who observe their conscientious coworkers, they interpret their voice behaviors differently in different contexts. So, for example, what we found is that peers only notice the promotive voice behaviors of highly conscientious people in the context that is not highly standardized. And even though the simple slopes were not significant for high levels of hierarchical authority, but we still found the pattern that they seem to ignore the voice behaviors of highly conscientious people in the work context with high level of hierarchical authority. And the theoretical implication is that the trait is being activated in certain contexts, but also that the others they either notice or not notice the activated expression of trait-relevant behaviors in certain contexts. And this is why we found peers fail to notice those promotive voice behaviors of highly conscientious people, which corresponded with lower perceptions of ethicality. And that's the theoretical contributions.
Thank you. Great. What do your results mean for HR policy or the practice of HR?
Thanks so much for the great question. So research suggests that organizations are currently juggling the challenges associated with the requirements for greater flexibility and decentralized decision-making, while also simultaneously trying to increase efficiency and ensure that employees are engaging in ethical behaviors. As we know from recent reports, about 49% of employees have observed some form of ethical violation in the workplace. And even these small ethical violations can accumulate into larger issues for both individuals, organizations, and society as a whole. So this is a really important issue that we're talking about in terms of ethicality and those perceptions. So we argue that this paper has several important implications for practice. The first one is really around this juggling of flexibility versus standardization, and actually recognizing that standardization or the centrality of decision-making actually does have some potential costs. And this is particularly important because organizations oftentimes invest significant amounts of resources in recruiting, selecting, developing, and training highly conscientious employees. But as we show in this paper, actually investing those resources, but in a context that constrains the ability of those employees to actually enact those key characteristics that you actually recruited them for in the first place, actually undermines their ultimate contribution in your organization. So this is really raising awareness to how we structure organizations, centralizing decision-making. And related to this is, of course, how we design jobs and how supervisors empower employees through, for example, enriched jobs. When we enrich people's jobs, essentially what we're doing is decentralizing part of that decision-making process or decreasing the hierarchy of authority because those individuals have control over how to engage in their work and make critical decisions related to their tasks. So this is very important in terms of this. So when you have highly conscientious employees, then we should feel that it's important to enrich those people's jobs as a function of this. That also means that our supervisors are spending less time kind of making decisions that those highly conscientious employees could be making themselves and making better use of their time and limited resources. The other component of this also is to recognize that many organizations are actually using perceptions of ethicality as a component of their performance management system and appraisal process. So, for example, in several organizations, including the military, promotion opportunities are actually determined in part by perceived ethicality. And this actually these results speak directly to this context where, for example, in the military is a high hierarchy of authority, right? Very centralized decision-making processes. You would hope that those conscientious employees would be recognized for their promotive voice, but actually, as our results suggest, this could potentially not be happening because the high hierarchy of authority diminishes that positive relationship with their perceptions of ethicality. So it has several important implications for how we design HR systems, policies, and practices, decision-making in organizations, how we empower our employees, as well as our performance management systems.
That's great. So many practical implications. I'm sure that practitioners and policymakers will find this very useful.
Thank you.
What to say? Thank you very much, Alex and Joseph, for joining me today and for your time. And I hope to see you again soon at some other place and point.